These bracelets belong to the Buduma people. The Buduma people are a people located in Chad and Niger. There used to be a much larger population, but they have shrunken over the years. These people used to belong to the Kanem Bornu civilization, and then they also belonged to the Sao civilizations. These civilizations that grew out of Chad have iron smelting from about 1200 BC, but the true date of the civilization's discovery is about 800 BC. It's pretty old. Now, it is in contrast to the other civilizations known in Africa who are all over the coasts, whether we're talking about North Africa, East Africa, or Southern Africa, they have access to the waters nearby. They represent a West Chadic population. Now, what's the difference between a West Chadic and an East Chadic population? Well, two things. If you're on the west side of the Chadic regions, then you probably have some Niger DNA inside of you. And if you're from the east side, you probably have some Nilo Saharan DNA inside of you, as is evidence in the languages that are in Chad, which are Nilo Saharan. This Chadic people who speak an Afro-Asiatic language are only one of the many tribes located within the Chadic world, divided in languages that have been around for thousands of years. Now, you might be thinking, how do they differ really from the other Chadic people? I mean, if we look at the Afro-Asiatic languages in the Middle Eastern areas, all the numbers seem to be the same. And of course, you've already mentioned, meaning me, I've already mentioned that the numbers are different between Somali and the Chadic languages. So what else could I possibly show you? Well, let's go to the numbers between two Chadic languages and see if there's even slight similarities. Now, to remind you, this is Hausa. It's also a Chadic language, so the numbers should be the same, considering that Sanskrit, which is different than Greek, still have very similar numbers. How can these two have very different? So, this woman will be reading the Bachama ones, and I'll be reading the Hausa.
Hiro is 1. Pe is 2. Mwakin is 3. Fwat is 4. Tuf is 5. Tukoltaka is 6. Tukolukpe is 7. Fofat is 8. Dombido is 9. Bo is 10.
It's interesting, right, that none of them look the same as the others, even though numbers are usually the thing that draw languages together when people talk about them. So again, to remind ourselves, Daya, Hido, nothing alike. Biyu, Pe, nothing alike. Uku, Mwakun, that one is the closest. Hudu, Fwat, Biar, Tuf, Shida, Tukul Taka, Bakwai, Tukulupo, Takwas, Fuatfuaf, Tara, Dombido, Goma, Boyu. It may seem like a very small thing to focus on, but remember that numbers are a small or a microcosm of the actual language itself. Now, why do we care that in Chad, even languages that are close to each other have completely different numbers? Well, of course, we must remind ourselves that the Bantu languages, for the most part, have the same numbers. The Indo European languages also have the same numbers. And of course, this is consistent within languages all over the world. It is an exception here in Chad. It is possible that the reason why they are so different is because this is where they originated. What do I mean? Well, if we look at the human race, the genetic diversity. So where you see the biggest diversity of people is in Africa because that's where human beings come from. So it's possible that in the same way, the reason you're seeing the biggest diversity linguistically is within this region. You know why? Because the Berber languages don't vary as much as these languages in numbers. Of course, the Omotic languages have similarities themselves, and the other languages also have their similarities. The Semitic languages are called the Semitic languages for a reason because they have those similarities. For example, we have Indo European numbers over here, and you can see 1, eins, einus, eis, ekas, 2, zwei, duo, duo, dva, 3, trija, tres, 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 4, fidwar, quatra, tetra, catravas, 5, fimf, cuenca, penca, panca, 6, sais, sex, hex, sat, 7, sibum, septum, hepta, sapta, 8, auta, octo, octo, asta, 9, neun, novum, enna, nava, 10, dian, decum, decadasa. But the problem gets worse than this because, as you can see here, where the separation is, in other words, where the numbers completely go different, there is still other languages where you can see the historical trace. For an example, you can see there 4, which in Old German is Fidwa. You can see in quarter, teteras, and katravas that those words are the same. And of course, in English, we have quarter, right? Then we also have quad, is another word. In other words, you have the historical writings for those numbers. The problem with those chadic words, and it's not true for all of the Afroasiatic words, numbers, the problem with those chadic ones is that you don't have any historical reality for those words anywhere. Then, of course, we can see there in 5, fünf, and fünf in the Indonesian language, Indo-European languages, that there's Bente and Panka, which again is represented in the language all over, and we don't need to go into it completely, but then we go down to decum, which we know from decade and words like that, but it doesn't matter because we have those numbers elsewhere. And then, of course, if we switch to the numbers in East Africa or the Horn of Africa, one we have Oromo, and then the second we have Somali, you can instantly see that they too have similarities. Toko, Ko, Labo, Lama, Sadi, Sade, Afar, Afar, Shan, Shan, Jaha, Li, Todoba, Torba, Sade, Sadid, and Sagal, Sagal. Now you're probably wondering, why are these ones so similar and the ones in Chad so different? Well, the answer again must be because the Chadic ones are so diverse. And remember, there's three main groups in Chad. There's the East version of Chad, there's the West version of the Chadic version, and then there's that middle version that I mentioned. For accuracy, let's compare a couple Berber languages. For example, if we look at the Canary Islands, the reconstruction of this language is very similar to Berber languages. And the reconstruction of these languages is also related to the Tuareg languages called Tamashek, and they're also related to the Tubu languages. And so we know that at least in the groups of the Afroasiatic, these languages are supposed to have similarities in numbers. But the Chadic, it's not like that. It just there's a huge breakaway. So, for example, if we look here, We have the Guanche languages. Look at the Ray's 1995 construction, but you'll see that there's a similarity throughout all the reconstructions over the years. But the 1995 reconstruction is the closest to the most accurate. When, which is Iye1 in Proto Berber, Sin, Sin, Amlat, Karad for three, Akkad for four, Hakus for four in Berber, Sumus, Sumus, Sed, Sade, Sa for seven, Sa for seven, Dam for eight, Dam for eight, Aldamaro for nine, Diz for nine, Maral and Maral for 10. If we compare this to Damashek, this is what it looks like.
إين سين كراب الكوز سموس صديس السا التام تظا مراو.
The numbers are damn near identical. So the question then remains, what the hell is going on here? It must be that it is truly ancient. But of course, there is always a chance that these languages borrowed from other languages, and that's what's responsible for this difference. But if we accept that premise, then a lot of things start to fall. For example, the number Goma has always been speculated to come from the Proto Bantu word Kumi. Now, through pattern recognition, we can see, even in the modern day using AI, that the word Goma, if Kumi is the word, then Mrao, the Berber version, and Midu, the Egyptian version, will also be a Proto Bantu reconstruction. This is one of the things that I said long time ago. If you look at the numbers, right, the Afroasiatic numbers, so we look there, possibly from Proto Afroasiatic, compare Proto Berber, Marwa, and Tamazigh, Mra, and Proto Chadic, Goam, with metathesis, if not borrowed from Niger Congo, hence whence Hausa, Goma. Now, how could Kumi and Goma be similar to each other? Well, remember, in these languages, the words float about. So, for example, if you look at the word Goma, it won't be hard for you to understand that the MA has moved to the back and the GA has moved to the front and become softer. So it would be Mago, but instead it's Maka in ancient Egyptian. This would mean that the Bantu languages had contact with the Afroasiatic languages prior to their formation in the modern world. And this is a serious concern today, or a serious understanding today. This borrowing theory makes a whole lot more sense if you actually look at all the numbers. And of course, I have to state that metathesis is a system in linguistics in which you trace how words change. For example, the word asva and the word horse. You can't tell immediately that these words have changed, but if you trace the language, asva turns to hasva, and you can see that in some languages the word has is still around, which would be horse. It's not easy when you look at it in the beginning. Asva, ASVA, turns into horse, but horse comes from has comes from hasva, hasva comes from asva. This is what they allege happened here, where, so let's look at the numbers. If we look at number 10 in all of them. So over here I have Hausa first. Then I have Kikuyu, which is a Bantu language or part of the Niger Congo languages. We have Doban, or we have the Somali languages, and Doban is the number 10 there. Then we have Marwa in the Berber languages, and then we have the ancient Egyptian. Now, if you look, all of them through except one, the Somali branch, you can see there that there's Goma, Kumi, Marwa, Mecha, or Muta in ancient Egyptian. The similarities, again, are very close, but this is only one word. Let's look at number 5 between the Bantu, Kikuyu, the second list, and the third list. You can see there Itano, and in number 5 for 5 is Shan. Again, very similar. But this would be a small thing if it wasn't for the next one, which I want you to pay attention to. It still hasn't been reconstructed by the people, but if you look at it, it's easy to tell. So look at Daya, which is number 1 in Hausa. In Kikuyu, it's Imwe. In the Berber languages, it's Wen or Yewen. And in ancient Egyptian, it's Wa. So let's try to see the similarities. So now I'm going to break it down. I just wanted to read it as it is. So if you read Daya in the beginning, this word Daya might come from the Bantu language or the Proto Bantu for the number 1, which in Kikuyu is represented by Imwe, but in other languages it's Inge. And as you can see with the Berber languages, Y and W are often interchangeable. So Inge would be 1, and Yuan or Ian, as we saw with the Damashek one, Ian could be the number 1, and Wool could be a similarity between all three of these. Another one that is very strange is the number 2, because the number 2 is Biu in Hausa, which sounds like the Bantu word for 2, which is Biri. But as you can see in Kikuyu, it's Igiri, but it's Biri with a B in other versions. And then, of course, in Somali, it's Labo, and then the other ones have nothing to do with it. But you can see that Proto Bantu might have played a huge role in building these words. Now, of course, some later additions in some of these would be from Arabic, but we don't need to get into that right now. What we need to focus on is the fact that the chadic languages might be an instant indicator that the Bantu people might have played an early role in the language of the ancient Egyptians. And if they did, this means that you could put a line under where the ancient Egyptian language came from. I want to remake a video of this, but I want to introduce the Semitic versions as well because I honestly believe the Semitic version reveals it to a higher degree than we think that this language was African in origin. For example, Khamta, which is number 3, and the 3 for Arabic are very similar. If you guys can remember, the word 3 in Arabic is thalatha. Khamta thalatha. Now, you might be thinking, well, they are similar, but what's that got to do with any of the other languages? Well, again, it might be a reconstruction thing because 3 in Kikuyu and other Bantu languages is Tatu. And so Thalatha might be a version of Tatu, and then Khamta a version of the Latha. And of course, with the Khamta word, it might be a problem with a reconstruction rather than a word thing. But even with Khamta, it's still believed to have some kind of similarity. And it might solve the fact that three is Grad in the Berber languages. And if you look at the Kikuyu to Hausa version as well, because of course, when they move, they take different things. Look at the Kikuyu version of three. Uku, Tatu in Bantu. Uku in Hausa, Tatu in Bantu. We're not looking at a small thing here. Like I said, in order to break these down, I'd have to look at them in a much bigger way, but that's if anybody is interested. Now, I have to tell you that besides the number 10 and the number 5 and the number 1, a lot of it will be very based on speculation and movement of letters. There, it will not be one for one like the other languages that we have seen. Which, by the way, this is one of the reasons why the ancient Egyptian language is still considered its own language because the numbers don't match almost any other unless you do metathesis. So, thanks to the people living in Chad, we might be able to tell this in the past from the past. But here's another problem: the people of Chad, some of the languages are dying. Some of them have only like 4,000 speakers, 100 speakers, and if they die without us writing them down, we might lose forever the ability to reconstruct the ancient Egyptian language. Which, of course, we have to do that with all of them. We have to take every single version of Afro-Asiatic and compare it to ancient Egyptian, which is something I might do. Thank you for watching. This one got a little bit long.